Three true tales of nocturnal dread. A lone driver's late-night detour ends in a heart-stopping encounter with a shadowed stranger. A routine road trip derails into a nightmare of unseen forces, and a simple drive home becomes a harrowing lesson in fear. Story 1. The Man in the Suit. The night was heavy with fog, the kind that doesn't just hang in the air but clings to everything: your windshield, your headlights, even your skin. It was close to midnight when Daniel, a 27-year-old project coordinator from Ohio, turned his car off the interstate onto a winding rural highway. He had been on the road for hours, his body buzzing from too much gas station coffee, his eyelids aching with fatigue. The destination was a small city 2 states away, where he had 2 back-to-back job interviews early the next morning. The road was barren, no streetlights, no gas stations, no houses in sight. Just thick trees lining each side, leaning in toward the asphalt like they were trying to swallow it whole. The only sound came from the hum of the tires and the occasional rattle of his loose glove compartment. Daniel tried to focus, but his mind kept drifting. He was thinking about how much he needed this job, how much his life depended on it. And that was when he saw it. At first, it was just a figure in the distance, illuminated for half a second in his high beams before vanishing into the darkness. A man, tall, thin, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit and a white shirt, standing motionless on the right shoulder of the road. His head was slightly tilted, as if he were watching Daniel pass. Daniel's heart skipped. "Okay, that's weird," he muttered, more to break the silence than to calm himself. There was no car, no hitchhiker's bag, nothing. Just a man in a suit in the middle of nowhere. He told himself it was probably just someone whose car broke down, but the thought didn't make sense. Who dresses like that on a deserted highway at midnight? He shook it off. A minute later, the road curved sharply to the left, and the fog thickened, forcing him to slow down. His windshield wipers squeaked against the glass, pushing aside the moisture that kept building up. Then, in the corner of his eye, there he was again. The man in the suit. Same spot on the shoulder, same stillness, same tilted head. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No way," he whispered. He'd just seen that guy 2 miles back. There was no chance a person could have gotten here that fast without a car. His stomach turned, but he kept driving, telling himself it had to be a trick of the fog or the shadows. Yet, 20 minutes later, as the road straightened, Daniel saw him a third time, this time closer to the middle of the road. His suit seemed darker now, damp from the mist, and though Daniel couldn't see his face clearly, he swore the man's mouth was curled into a faint, unnatural smile. Daniel swerved slightly to avoid him, his tires kicking up a spray of water from the damp pavement. As he passed, he couldn't resist glancing in the rearview mirror. But there was nothing there. No figure. No shadow. Just the empty road swallowed by fog. By now, Daniel's pulse was pounding in his ears. His brain scrambled for explanations: sleep deprivation, hallucinations from fatigue, maybe even some weird roadside mannequin prank. But none of it felt right. Every instinct told him this was something else, something that didn't belong. He reached into the passenger seat for his phone to call his girlfriend, but the signal was gone. No bars. Just a mocking "no service" in the top corner of the screen. The road ahead narrowed, the trees closing in so tightly that their branches almost touched overhead. His headlights seemed weaker now, barely cutting through the dark. That was when his car's check engine light blinked on. "Not now. Please, not now," Daniel muttered, his voice cracking. The engine coughed once, twice, and for a brief moment, he thought it might stall. He eased off the gas, coasting slowly. The silence in those seconds was worse than the sound of the engine. It made him realize just how alone he was. And then, he saw him again. This time, the man wasn't on the side of the road. He was standing directly in Daniel's lane, no more than 30 feet ahead, facing the car. His head was still tilted, but now Daniel could see his eyes, two pale, glinting orbs that seemed to catch the light in a way that didn't make sense. His hands hung at his sides, but his fingers twitched, curling and uncurling like he was eager for something. Daniel slammed the brakes, the tires screeching on the wet pavement. The car skidded, coming to a stop just short of the figure. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other. Daniel felt a coldness in his chest, like the air had been sucked out of the car. And then, the man simply stepped backward into the fog and vanished. Daniel didn't wait to process it. He hit the gas, pushing the car harder than he should have on the slick road. The fog seemed to grow thicker with every turn, and twice he thought he saw movement in the trees alongside him, tall, dark shapes pacing him, keeping just out of sight. When he finally saw the dim glow of a gas station sign in the distance, relief hit him so hard he almost laughed. The station was old, one flickering bulb illuminating the pumps. Inside, an elderly clerk sat behind the counter, watching a small TV. Daniel pulled up, got out, and staggered inside. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his wallet. The clerk looked him over and asked if he was okay. Daniel told him, haltingly, what had happened. The man in the suit, how he'd appeared multiple times, how he'd vanished into the fog. The clerk's face went pale. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "I've heard stories about him for years. Folks call him the Watcher. They say he only appears to people driving alone late at night. Sometimes, people see him once. Sometimes, he follows them all the way home." Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in his motel room with the curtains drawn, every shadow outside looking like the outline of a man in a black suit. When he left the next morning, daylight made the world feel safer. The fog was gone, and the highway looked harmless. But every time he glanced in his rearview mirror, he half expected to see him, the pale eyes, the tilted head, just watching. Story 2, The Flat Tire. It was past 1 in the morning when Greg, a 34-year-old truck parts salesman from Indiana, turned off the main highway and onto a 2-lane country road. He wasn't supposed to be there. His GPS had glitched earlier, rerouting him through what it claimed was a faster route. The map on his dashboard screen showed nothing but black space beyond the pale blue line of the road, and the signal bars on his phone had vanished 20 minutes ago. The air was warm but oddly still, the kind of oppressive quiet that feels staged. The road cut through wide, empty farmland with the occasional cluster of trees. No other cars. No distant lights. Just the hum of his tires and the faint rattle of a loose soda bottle in his cup holder. Greg was tired. His back ached from the long drive, and he was counting the miles until the next town. But then, a sudden, sharp pop shattered the monotony. The steering wheel jerked in his hands, and the car lurched slightly to the right. He gritted his teeth, easing it toward the shoulder. "Great. Just perfect," he muttered, slamming it into park and stepping out. The humid air hit him like a wall. The driver's side rear tire sagged flat against the rim. He cursed under his breath. Greg was no stranger to changing a tire, but there was something about the emptiness of this place that made him uneasy. He popped the trunk, grabbed the spare and the jack, and crouched down beside the car. That's when he heard it, a sound just beyond the glow of his headlights. A faint crunch. Like someone stepping on gravel. He froze, the hair on his arms rising. He scanned the darkness. Nothing but endless fields and shadows. Probably just a raccoon, he told himself, forcing a laugh that sounded too thin to be convincing. He went back to loosening the lug nuts. Crunch. This time, it was closer. Greg stood, holding the tire iron like a weapon. "Hello?" he called, his voice carrying into the dark. No answer. Just the heavy silence returning. Pressing in from all sides. He told himself to hurry. He got the flat off and started rolling the spare into position. That's when he caught movement, a flicker of pale fabric, at the edge of his headlights. It was a man. Tall, thin, dressed in a dirty white t-shirt and jeans. His head was shaved, and even from a distance, Greg could see his eyes glinting in the light. The man wasn't walking down the road or approaching openly, he was just standing there in the field, half-turned, watching. Greg swallowed hard. "You all right, buddy? Need help?" he called. No answer. The man's head tilted slightly, and for a moment Greg had the unnerving impression that the stranger wasn't even blinking. Greg looked back at his car, calculating how fast he could get inside and lock the doors. When he glanced toward the field again, the man was gone. Greg's heart pounded. He shoved the spare onto the axle, tightened the nuts as quickly as his shaking hands would allow, and threw the flat into the trunk. He climbed into the driver's seat, slammed the locks down, and started the engine. The headlights swept across the field as he pulled back onto the road, and caught the man standing much closer now, at the fence line, his hands gripping the wire, that same unblinking stare fixed on Greg's car. Greg gunned it, tires squealing on the pavement. He didn't care if the GPS was wrong, he'd take the next turn that led anywhere with lights. His breath came fast, the inside of the car suddenly stifling. For 10 minutes, the road stayed empty. His shoulders began to unclench, and he told himself he'd imagined half of it. That was when he saw the headlights in his rearview mirror. They came out of nowhere, two bright points cutting through the dark, approaching fast. Greg's first thought was relief. Another driver meant he wasn't alone anymore. But that feeling evaporated when the lights closed the gap and began tailgating him, so close he could almost see the grille of the vehicle. He tapped his brakes lightly, hoping the driver would back off. Instead, the vehicle swerved, first left, then right, as if testing whether to pass him, or force him off the road. Greg's mouth went dry. He pushed his speed up to 70, then 75. The other car stayed right on him. The road ahead split, one way continuing straight, the other veering left toward what a battered sign claimed was Milford, 7 miles. Greg didn't think, he took the left. The headlights followed. The road narrowed, hemmed in by thick trees. Greg's pulse was a drumbeat in his ears. He spotted a gas station sign ahead, its flickering neon barely visible through the branches. He floored it. As he pulled into the cracked asphalt lot, the tailing vehicle slowed at the entrance, then stopped. Greg couldn't see the driver through the glare of their headlights. They idled for a few seconds, and then, slowly, turned and disappeared back down the road. Greg sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel, watching the taillights vanish. His hands were trembling so badly he had to sit for a few minutes before getting out. Inside, the gas station attendant, a middle-aged man with a cigarette tucked behind his ear, looked up and said, "You all right, man? You look like you saw a ghost." Greg gave a shaky laugh. Something like that. The attendant's expression darkened when Greg described the flat tire and the man in the field. "Yeah, you're not the first to run into him," the attendant said, lowering his voice. "Some folks say he messes with cars, nails on the road, slow leaks, just so you'll have to stop out here. Not everyone who stops makes it to the next town." Greg left with a full tank, but he couldn't shake the image of that man's eyes, and the awful certainty that if the gas station hadn't been there, he might have been the next name whispered about on lonely roads. Story 3, The Diner Shadow. The rain had started around 11 p.m., the steady, whispering kind that makes the road look like black glass under your headlights. Maria, 29, had been driving for hours after visiting her sister in another state. The plan was to push through the night and reach home before sunrise. She'd done late-night drives before, but something about tonight felt different. By the time her stomach started growling, she was in the middle of nowhere. No billboards, no clusters of houses, just dark stretches of road broken by the occasional stop sign. So when she spotted the warm glow of a neon, "Open 24 hours" sign in the distance, she almost sighed in relief. It was a small roadside diner, the kind frozen in time. Chrome trim, a row of booths, and a counter lined with empty stools. A single waitress in a faded uniform leaned against the counter, watching an old TV mounted in the corner. The only other person inside was a man in a baseball cap, hunched over his coffee in the far booth. Maria chose a booth near the window. The waitress brought her coffee and a menu without much small talk. Maria ordered a burger and fries, then settled back to check her phone. No signal. She sighed, not unusual out here. The burger was good, the fries hot, and for a little while, she almost forgot she still had 3 hours of driving ahead. She paid, thanked the waitress, and headed out into the cool, damp air. That's when she saw it, movement in her peripheral vision. She glanced toward the diner's window and saw the man in the baseball cap standing now, watching her through the glass. His face was partly hidden by the brim, but she could feel his eyes on her. She quickened her pace, sliding into her car and locking the doors. The lot was empty except for her vehicle and an old pickup truck parked near the back. She started the engine, pulling out onto the road. The rain was falling harder now, the wipers swiping rhythmically. She checked her mirror, and there he was. The pickup truck's headlights flared in the darkness as it pulled onto the road behind her. At first, she told herself it was coincidence. Maybe he was just headed the same way. But after 10 minutes of winding rural roads, he was still there. Every turn she made, he followed. Every time she accelerated, his headlights closed in. Her pulse began to climb. She didn't know these roads well enough to speed too much in the rain, but she also didn't want to lead him toward home. She remembered a motel she'd passed earlier, its flickering vacancy sign burned into her mind. She decided to head there, at least she'd be around other people. When she spotted the sign again, she pulled into the cracked asphalt lot, parking near the office. The truck slowed, idling for a moment in the entrance, its headlights glaring in her rearview mirror. Then, instead of leaving or parking, it rolled slowly along the perimeter of the lot, disappearing behind the building. Maria's skin prickled. She grabbed her overnight bag and hurried into the office, where a heavy-set man behind the counter gave her a curious look. "You got a room?" she asked, breathless. He nodded, sliding a key across the counter after she paid in cash. "End of the hall, second floor," he said. "Everything all right?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Just, long drive." The room smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals. She locked the door, double-checked the window latch, and pulled the curtains shut. The rain's patter against the glass was steady, almost comforting. She set her bag down, took off her damp jacket, and sat on the bed. She was just starting to relax when she heard it, the faint crunch of footsteps on the walkway outside her door. Slow. Measured. She froze, listening. The sound stopped directly outside. Then, a shadow passed across the narrow gap at the bottom of the curtains. Her phone still had no service. She reached for the motel's landline phone, but before she could dial, a single, deliberate knock echoed through the room. Her heart pounded in her ears. She didn't move, didn't answer. The knock came again. Louder. She crept to the window and carefully pulled the curtain aside just a fraction. In the dim yellow glow of the parking lot light, she saw the brim of the baseball cap. He was standing there, perfectly still, head tilted toward the door. Maria stepped back, her mind racing. She grabbed the motel phone again and called the front desk. The man answered on the second ring. "There's someone outside my room," she whispered. "I think he followed me from the diner." The clerk didn't sound surprised. "Stay inside. I'll call the sheriff." She hung up, backing away from the door. The footsteps started again, slow, dragging, and faded down the walkway. She didn't go near the window again. It took the sheriff 20 minutes to arrive. By the time he knocked and announced himself, the walkway outside was empty. The pickup truck was gone. Maria gave her statement, describing the man as best she could. The sheriff listened without interrupting, then said something that chilled her. "You're lucky," he said quietly. "Couple years back, a girl went missing from that same diner. Last person who saw her said she left with a guy in a beat-up pickup. We never found her." That night, Maria didn't sleep. She sat in the armchair, watching the door, waiting for footsteps that never came again. But even in daylight, driving the final hours home, every time a truck appeared in her mirror, she felt her chest tighten, and she knew she'd never look at a late-night diner the same way again.